大家好，我是方美昂. Hello, everyone. I'm Alison Friedman, the Executive and Artistic Director of Carolina Performing Arts at UNC Chapel Hill. Now, I just arrived here 2 weeks ago. I don't even start work until next week. I've actually spent the last 20 years in Beijing and Hong Kong. I wish I could see all of you in person to know who you are. I suspect 20 years could be as long or maybe longer than some of your lifetimes. So I certainly spent a lifetime in China. And in this little brief window, I'm excited to share with you my China journey, how I ended up working in the performing arts, building bridges between China and the world through the performing arts, and how it now landed me in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which is perhaps an unexpected place to be continuing this China journey. So I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and had the great fortune of starting to learn Chinese language in high school, long before the rest of the world figured out that was a good idea. So this is back in the 90s. And at that time, I knew I loved dance, theater, music. I played piano since I was a kid, but I loved languages. I was interested in poetry. So I thought, okay, well, China has this rich history of literature. And I started with languages. I continued to university, and at university, I got stuck. All of my classmates were business and econ majors, envisioning themselves on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And I thought, I like dance. Why am I learning Chinese? I soldiered on. And this is the moment where I realized there was something I like to call the battle of and versus or. I'm sure, like many of you, you have many interests, many skill sets, many passions. And the world likes to tell us to choose. They tell us choose arts or business, choose academics or politics, choose work or family, or. They like to put us in these little silos. But humans are complex beings, and we have many interests and many skill sets. And our 21st century world needs us to work across silos. Specialization depth is great, but there needs to be an element of breadth. And that's where and can triumph. So my China journey is really about searching for the and that allowed me to combine these interests and abilities in international relations, in languages, literature, performing arts, and people. So in 2001, I was testing out an and. I went to Beijing to intern at the Beijing Bureau of CNN, thinking I'd go the journalism route. I thought, well, journalism is kind of an and. You're in front of a camera, so that's performance. You're drawing on your language skills, international relations, politics. Journalists certainly have to have a great breadth of knowledge. So I thought, well, maybe that's where I'll go. And while I was there, I met one of China's first independent performing arts collectives called the Living Dance Studio. Wu Wenguang is one of the early days independent documentary filmmakers. Wen Hui is a choreographer. And I performed with them that summer in 2001 in a big project that was in a huge construction site. Beijing had just gotten the Olympic bid. The city was alive with energy of opening up to the world, and this feeling of we are becoming, interconnecting with the rest of the world. So that performance that summer was a huge watershed moment of realizing I could find family in China. I had spent time studying abroad as a college student in Harbin at Harbin Institute of Technology. I had spent some summer programs at Princeton and Beijing in Beijing. And I always felt like an outsider in a faraway land. But performing that summer in 2001, it sounds like a cliche because there's truth to it, is we had this shared culture of performance, of modern dance. So I was inspired to go back to university and apply for a Fulbright fellowship, which is a research fellowship, to go back to China after university. I enrolled at Peking University History Department and the Beijing Dance Academy. And my Fulbright research was looking at the history of performance in China, contemporary performance. I wanted to put my experience with the Living Dance Studio into context. Were they the only ones? Were there millions of them? How did they survive financially? Who funded them? What cultural policies did or did not allow that kind of art to happen? What was the education system that did or did not train these artists? So at that time, my family and everyone around me thought I was nuts. They thought this was so niche. How is modern dance relevant? That's so tiny. Why are you wasting your time? But actually, this was the perfect window to see a much broader picture because nothing exists in a vacuum. The arts exist touching economics, public policy, cultural policy, education systems, disposable income, who's buying the tickets. And so by finding that point of entry, the very specific, I was able to get to the much more universal and of this massive country that felt otherwise inaccessible to me. So I went to Beijing in 2002 to do this research, and I never left. I worked with different arts organizations. I was also a DJ for 2 years at China Radio International. I had a live music program 7 days a week from noon to 2, the Easy Cafe on 国际广播电台. And what I started to realize wasn't just that I love the arts. I loved how the arts could bring people together for shared experiences and show something that you don't see in the press, that you don't see through politics, and that you don't see through business and commerce. In that period from 2002, when I went on my Fulbright, up to the Olympics, the rate of change and opening and interconnectivity was growing exponentially. Suddenly, my parents could read about China every day in the Washington Post, about the environmental problems, about the booming economy. And in Beijing, I could get my Starbucks and buy some products that before I couldn't buy in China, and now they were imported. And those things weren't wrong, but they were incomplete. Just because my parents were reading about the environmental problems in China or in Beijing, the pollution, that wasn't entirely wrong, but it didn't show the full picture. And I just kept thinking, how can I show the fuller picture of this complexity and contradiction and diversity and richness of these countries and cultures that frankly nobody is seeing through day-to-day commerce, news outlets, and politics. And that was where the performing arts come in. So in 2009, I started my own company called Pong Productions. Our mission was bringing China and the world together through the performing arts. We worked with independent contemporary performing arts groups from China, and we toured them all over the world to more than 50 countries on 5 continents. We brought them to Lincoln Center, Sydney Opera House, Théâtre de la Ville in Paris. And we brought international, not just American, but French, Australian, Japanese, all kinds of artists into China to tour more than 25 cities and regions around the country. We had deep partnerships with universities, doing a lot of education programs. Very often, the artists we brought to China were the first international people that those students had an opportunity to engage with and to learn on a person-to-person level. So for us, success was when an audience saw a performance or had a workshop or attended a discussion, and their view of whether it was China, if we were touring outside, or whether it was America, if we were inside, had to get pushed out just a little more to say, oh, okay, so China has that too. China has avant-garde modern dance. Or we toured a play in 2011 and 2013 all about the Pentagon Papers and the big Supreme Court case. And so in China, to be able to tour a play about America's own grappling with government censorship of the media, that allowed us to have conversations in China that maybe there were more similarities than differences in some of these hot button issues. So Pong Productions still exists. However, in 2017, I was recruited by the largest arts and cultural development in the world. It's based in Hong Kong, called the West Kowloon Cultural District. It's 100 acres of land where they are building 5 major performing arts centers, 2 museums, including 2 of the biggest museums in Asia, and massive outdoor public park space, commercial, retail, dining, entertainment facilities. So from 2017 until 1 month ago, I was artistic director of performing arts at West Kowloon Cultural District. During that time, we opened the first 2 art centers, the Xiqu Center, Heikokzhongsam, the Chinese Opera House, and a place called Free Space, which is one of the largest black box theaters in China. A black box is a very flexible kind of theater that allows a lot of different types of performance. Now, after 20 years in Greater China, I decided I should learn a little bit about filial piety and be a 好孩子 and come closer to my parents, two of my favorite people in the world. I wanted to be closer to family. So I have now moved back to the US. My parents are still in DC, but I was recruited to be the artistic and executive director of Carolina Performing Arts, which is a major performing arts organization based at the University of North Carolina. So now I have this another and where I'm working not only with performing arts, bringing in amazing performances from China and all over the world, but also working with academic disciplines in different departments to dive deeper. You know, it's with performing arts touring, often it's an exchange of commerce. You buy and sell a show, you know, a troupe comes in, does one show and they leave, and that's great. But these one-off wonders are not very impactful. Again, the richness of the arts to show you a side of a country or a culture that you don't typically get to see requires a little more in-depth engagement, more time to understand the background of that art form and that artist and the context that they work in. If you just see something in a vacuum, you might not appreciate it in the same way. A great example is Chinese opera. The first time I saw Chinese opera, I thought, oh my God, this is really kind of off-putting. But then when I watched rehearsals and I got to know a bit more about the background, it's like any language. It's a performing arts language. It's like any spoken language. You need to have a little bit more of the vocabulary and the grammar, as it were, to appreciate and understand the language. So now that I'm back in the US, I am continuing my engagement with China and with Chinese artists from this side of the oceans. And I think for many of you, especially with COVID travels and with some of the tensions, it's harder to think about a career where you moved to China for 20 years like I did. And you need to kind of think, well, how do you have those ties and experiences on this side? And we need both. It's and, not or. Obviously, it's irreplaceable to go to China and to live there and make friendships and to work side by side. I only ever worked in Chinese organizations, and that allows you to have a depth of understanding that you don't get from afar. But we need people here in America who are reaching across divides and finding their own ands, whether it's through the arts or soccer or other commerce, that allow us to keep those connections going. So that's a fast and furious overview. I think I have 2 more minutes. I'm not sure. I'm watching the clock go. And I don't know if this platform allows questions or answers, but that's a big overview of how I've used the arts to drive my career of building bridges and helping to show sides that you don't see through other industries, and to find my own personal and professional and triumphing over or. And now my next chapter will be doing that, not in China like the last 20 years, but here in America, where we continue to bring artists in to work across disciplines and genres to build those bridges so that we get to see our shared humanity underneath all of the othering that's going on. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm more than happy to be in touch with anyone who has further questions outside of the platform. And maybe Cleo or some of the hosts can let me know if there is a chance for Q&A now. I'm happy to take it. And otherwise, 加油，大家。